A massive infrastructure project that cost nearly $6.5 billion has become the center of an unexpected international controversy today, revealing complex tensions between economic cooperation and political leverage. The newly constructed crossing between Ontario and Windsor on the Canadian side and Detroit in Michigan represents one of the most significant border infrastructure investments in North American history. Yet its planned opening faced threats that expose deeper issues about trade relationships, political maneuvering, and the sometimes messy intersection of commerce and governance. The bridge spanning the Detroit River was designed to handle thousands of commercial vehicles daily, serving as a critical artery for two economies that have become profoundly interconnected over decades. Its construction came entirely through Canadian financing, a fact that would later become central to the political dispute that threatened its launch. The total investment reached approximately $6.4 billion, covering not just the physical span itself, but also customs facilities, highway connections, and all the supporting infrastructure required on both sides of the international boundary. The financial arrangement behind this project deserves careful examination, because it contradicts some of the claims that would later emerge. Under an agreement formalized in 2012 between Canadian authorities and the state of Michigan, the construction costs would be borne entirely by Canada, but Michigan contributed no upfront funding for the building phase. In return for this arrangement, Michigan received something quite valuable: joint ownership of the completed structure. Furthermore, once Canada recovers its construction costs through toll collections, Michigan becomes entitled to receive half of all net toll proceeds going forward. This was not a hidden arrangement or a last-minute deal struck behind closed doors. The terms were public, negotiated openly, and signed by Michigan's governor at the time, a Republican named Rick Snyder. The project moved through all proper governmental channels. In 2013, the United States Department of State issued the presidential permit necessary for construction to proceed, a required step for any international border crossing. 4 years later, the American president and Canada's prime minister issued a joint statement describing the bridge as a vital economic connection between the two nations. In 2019, legislation that included $15 million in American customs funding for the project received presidential approval. Throughout all these stages, the bridge was reviewed, endorsed, and supported through official processes. It was not a secret initiative or a project that somehow slipped past oversight. Given this history, a social media declaration in early February 2026 came as a shock to many observers. The American president posted a statement suggesting that Canada owned both sides of the bridge and implied that the United States would need to receive compensation before the crossing could open. The post connected this infrastructure project to broader trade complaints, including Ontario's decision to ban American alcohol products from provincial retail outlets, Canadian protections for its dairy industry, and a recent trade agreement between Canada and China. That China agreement had reduced Chinese tariffs on Canadian canola from 85% down to 15%, opening an estimated $7 billion in new export opportunities. Washington characterized that China deal as hostile to American interests, and within this framing, the bridge appeared to become a point of leverage. The leverage argument encountered an immediate obstacle rooted in factual accuracy. The ownership structure described in the social media post did not match the documented legal reality. Canada does not own both sides of the bridge. Michigan owns half, as clearly stated in the 2012 agreement. The United States has not been excluded from compensation. Michigan was granted 50% ownership and future revenue rights without contributing any construction funding. American steel was used in construction on the Michigan side, and American workers participated in building it. These were not minor details tucked away in obscure documents. They were central public terms of a bipartisan agreement. Reactions came swiftly. The mayor of Windsor expressed disbelief at the characterization of the deal. Rick Snyder, the former Michigan governor who had negotiated and signed the original agreement, went further by publishing a detailed column in a major Detroit newspaper. Point by point, Snyder corrected the record, reminding readers that Michigan had negotiated the deal specifically to secure long-term economic benefits without bearing upfront costs. His assessment was direct and unambiguous. Using this particular project as leverage made no strategic sense because the resulting harm would primarily fall on Michigan workers, Michigan businesses, and the state's crucial automotive industry. To understand why this bridge generates such strong feelings and why blocking it would have significant consequences, it helps to examine what currently exists. The Ambassador Bridge, constructed in 1929, has carried commercial traffic between Detroit and Windsor for nearly a full century. This crossing is privately owned by a Detroit family who acquired it in 1979. Because the Detroit Windsor Tunnel prohibits commercial trucks, the Ambassador Bridge effectively operates as a near monopoly for heavy truck traffic across this critical corridor. Every large truck hauling automotive components, agricultural products, and manufactured goods across the Detroit River has depended on that single crossing for decades, generating more than $60 million in toll revenue annually for the private owners. When serious plans for a publicly owned second bridge gained momentum, the family that owns the Ambassador Bridge opposed them with considerable resources and determination. They spent roughly $30 million supporting a Michigan ballot initiative that would have required statewide voter approval for any new international bridge construction. Michigan voters rejected that initiative by approximately 60%. The family pursued multiple federal lawsuits claiming exclusive rights to operate any Detroit-Windsor crossing. They lost each case, including an appeal, and the Supreme Court declined to hear the matter during the first Trump administration. Advertisements even aired on certain cable news programs urging the president to cancel the project. He did not cancel it. His administration proceeded with funding and regulatory support. This history resurfaced when the threat to block the new bridge emerged. The former Michigan governor's column noted that the family owning the existing bridge represents significant Republican donors and has lobbied against the public bridge project for years at both state and federal levels. If the new bridge were delayed or blocked, the primary beneficiary would not be the United States government or American workers. It would be the existing private owner whose monopoly position would remain completely intact. The former governor wrote plainly that there would be one big winner if a blockade succeeded, and it would not be Canada. The reaction within Michigan proved swift and remarkably unified across partisan lines. A United States senator warned that canceling the project would create serious problems for Michigan businesses, supply chains, and consumers who would ultimately face higher costs. The state's governor, who had maintained a working relationship with the president despite political differences, authorized her press secretary to issue a clear statement. That statement emphasized that the bridge supports employment, strengthens the automotive industry, and represents bipartisan cooperation, financed entirely by Canada and constructed by union workers from both countries. Even a Republican state legislative leader, while attempting to defend the president's overall posture, acknowledged publicly that the existing bridge is owned by an American family and suggested those owners could also become targets of Canadian retaliation. The fact that the private bridge owner's name surfaced in official press briefings underscored how thoroughly economics and politics had become intertwined in this dispute. Beyond political maneuvering lies the fundamental economic case that drove the bridge's creation. The Detroit-Windsor corridor handles roughly 1/4 of all merchandise trade between Canada and the United States. The integrated North American automotive industry depends on components crossing the border multiple times during the manufacturing process before a finished vehicle emerges from an assembly line. Delays translate directly into lost productivity and increased costs for manufacturers on both sides of the border. The Ambassador Bridge's Canadian approach feeds into Windsor city streets before connecting to highways, forcing trucks to navigate traffic lights and urban congestion. The new bridge connects directly to Ontario Highway 401 and Interstate 75, providing a freeway-to-freeway connection that eliminates those bottlenecks entirely. Research from a university in Windsor estimated that the new crossing could reduce commercial transit times by up to 20 minutes per trip. Over 3 decades, that efficiency gain could save approximately $2.3 billion for trucking companies and the industries they serve, including American manufacturers and agricultural exporters. Redundancy represents another crucial factor that supporters emphasize. With only one truck-capable crossing currently operating in the region, any disruption to the Ambassador Bridge creates immediate vulnerability for the entire supply chain. A structural problem, mechanical failure, or protest blockade can halt heavy commercial traffic completely. The tunnel cannot absorb that volume because it prohibits commercial trucks. The new bridge provides a second route, strengthening supply chain resilience for both countries. Blocking it would preserve a single point of failure in one of the most important trade corridors on the continent, a risk that many business leaders and logistics experts view as unacceptable. Against this backdrop, Canada's Prime Minister responded to the social media threat with notable restraint. The morning after the post appeared, he placed a direct phone call to the American president. The conversation did not escalate into a public confrontation. The Prime Minister laid out 4 straightforward facts. Canada financed the bridge entirely. Michigan and Canada share ownership under the documented 2012 agreement. American and Canadian steel were both used in construction. Workers from both nations built it together. He then expressed that he looked forward to the bridge's bridge's opening. Later, speaking to reporters, the Prime Minister described the bridge as an example of cooperation, highlighted its importance for commerce and tourism, and mentioned that he had asked the United States ambassador, a Michigan native, to help maintain constructive dialogue. He even added a lighthearted remark about an upcoming hockey game between Canadian and American women's teams, signaling confidence rather than confrontation. The White House followed with a statement calling it unacceptable for Canada to own the bridge fully. That assertion had already been publicly contradicted by Michigan officials, the former governor's detailed column, and the actual text of the 2012 agreement. Washington appeared to be responding to a version of the arrangement that did not align with documented facts available in the public record. A contradiction remains that has not been fully explained. In 2017, the American president called the bridge vital to both nations. In 2019, he signed legislation providing customs funding for it. The bridge's ownership structure, financing model, and economic justification did not change in the years between then and the recent controversy. What did change were trade tensions, Ontario's retaliatory alcohol ban implemented in response to other disputes, and Canada's trade agreement with China that Washington viewed unfavorably. The bridge became entangled in a broader dispute that extended far beyond its concrete towers and steel cables. The former Michigan governor framed the issue as basic arithmetic. Michigan secured half ownership of a multi-billion-dollar asset without any upfront cost. Future toll revenue will flow to the state once Canada recovers its investment. The project creates employment, reduces transit times, and strengthens supply chains for industries on both sides of the border. Blocking it would undermine those benefits while preserving a private monopoly that has operated since 1979 without meaningful competition. As the planned opening date approached, construction neared completion despite the political turbulence. Approximately 6,000 Canadians are expected to cross daily to work in Detroit once the bridge opens. Around 8,000 trucks will use the crossing each day, moving goods between two economies that rely on each other in ways that often escape public attention. The bridge stands as a physical representation of that interdependence, built to facilitate the movement of people and products that sustain industries and communities on both sides of the border. The political drama surrounding the bridge revealed deeper dynamics worth examining. A social media threat triggered a detailed fact check from a Republican former governor. It prompted coordinated pushback from Michigan's current leadership across party lines. It drew a calm but firm rebuttal from Canada's Prime Minister. The episode highlighted how infrastructure, trade policy, and domestic politics can collide in unexpected ways, creating controversies that might seem puzzling to outside observers but make sense within the context of broader tensions. It also underscored that leverage in international disputes carries consequences that ripple across state boundaries and industry sectors, often affecting workers and businesses that have no direct involvement in the political disagreements. In the end, construction on the bridge did not halt. It did not become a casualty of tariff disputes or retaliatory trade bans. The agreement signed in 2012 remains legally intact. Michigan's ownership stake remains unchanged from what was negotiated more than a decade ago. The economic case that justified the project continues to rest on the same data and projections that existed years earlier when the deal was first struck. Canada financed the project according to the terms everyone agreed to, structured a deal that granted Michigan joint ownership without requiring upfront payment, and built a second crossing designed to ease congestion and strengthen the resilience of cross-border supply chains. American workers contributed their labor to its construction. American businesses stand to benefit from reduced transit times and increased reliability when shipping products across the border. The private monopoly that controlled heavy truck traffic across the Detroit River for decades will face direct competition for the first time in generations. What began as a social media threat against a $6.4 billion international crossing ended with the same reality that existed before the controversial post appeared online. A completed bridge built to move commerce more efficiently between two deeply connected economies, prepared to open according to schedule. Instead of dramatic reversals or emergency executive actions, the outcome rested on contracts signed in 2012, permits issued in 2013, federal funding approved in 2019, and a financing model that has been publicly documented and available for examination for more than a decade. Soon, thousands of commuters will cross between Windsor and Detroit each day as part of their normal routines. Roughly roughly 8,000 trucks will move through a corridor specifically designed to cut up to 20 minutes off commercial trips, a seemingly small time savings that adds up to enormous efficiency gains when multiplied across thousands of daily crossings and calculated over years. Toll revenues will flow according to the joint ownership agreement that gives Michigan half of a multi-billion-dollar asset it did not have to finance during the construction phase. The episode raises questions that extend beyond this particular bridge and this specific controversy. Was the infrastructure project ever truly the central issue, or did it simply become a convenient pressure point in a wider trade battle involving alcohol sales, dairy protections, and agreements with China? Did the threat to block the opening strengthen America's overall negotiating position with Canada, or did it risk undercutting a state whose economy depends fundamentally on smooth cross-border trade? When political strategy collides with signed agreements, documented facts, and economic data, which elements should ultimately carry more weight in determining outcomes, guys? The bridge stands as a testament to what can be accomplished when governments commit to long-term cooperation on infrastructure that serves mutual economic interests. It also serves as a reminder that even projects with clear benefits and transparent agreements can become entangled in political disputes that have little to do with the infrastructure itself. The resolution in this case came not through dramatic confrontation, but through the steady application of facts, the advocacy of affected state officials, and the persistence of legal agreements that outlasted the controversy surrounding them. Whether this represents a sustainable model for managing future disputes over cross-border infrastructure and trade remains an open question as economic integration continues to deepen, while political relationships grow more complex and sometimes more contentious.